Okay, it looks like we are live. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I know you have a lot of options out there. There's a lot of stuff going on YouTube, but you are here with me and George, and we're going to talk about George tonight. He is a wonderful guy. I've had the opportunity to devour his YouTube videos, and he is a firecracker. He is going to grow real quick. He's getting a lot of views on his stuff. He's knowledgeable. Love that aspect that he could just pick up an item and just start talking about it. It's amazing. I want to say hi to a few people real quick in the chat. I want to say hey to Aaron. I appreciate you guys. I know that you're here and you're going to help me moderate tonight. That's pretty awesome. My buddy Chris Craystation, I see you. Alex, Fat Man the Flipper. Zeno's here, of course. Pat D72. Thank you very much for being here, Pat. I really appreciate your support, my man. I need to get you on this show, that's for sure. Mr. Sadie, that dude, he's awesome. He's a great guy. He knows a lot about stuff too. Constellation Pegasus, welcome to the chat. So that's what we've got going on right now. I'm actually going to turn this over, and I would like whatever George feels comfortable sharing with us about anything that he would like. I mean, antiques, as far as like how you got into the business. Just tell us a little bit of your story if you don't mind.
Oh, well, that's great, John. Well, thank you. And it's really been fun getting to know you and your channel. I just discovered you a couple of weeks ago because I'm pretty new to YouTube, really. And so I'm starting to expand my boundaries and look for other people who do things like I do. And I really enjoyed your site, and especially when you had your opening of your store and all that good stuff. So, but okay, well, let's see, me. How did I get started in all of this? I started collecting when I was really little. I was 6 years old, and we were walking into the Navy Exchange because my dad had been military, and I found a wheat penny on the ground, and my folks all said, "Oh, you're going to spend it on penny candy." And I said, "No, I'm going to save it." And I still have it. That was the beginning of my coin collection.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then it just must have been in the blood because I started collecting stamps, and then I started collecting car parts. We lived in the country, and there was an old shed, and so I'd go find hubcaps on the road, or we'd dig in the backwoods, and there'd be parts of some old car thrown down there. Some of that ended up being pretty valuable, so that kind of whetted my appetite for the resale aspect. And then I got out of college, and they were wanting to program me to be a stockbroker. And I got out just in time for the stock market to have a huge crash. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do with myself instead? And it took about a year, but I ended up answering an ad in a newspaper for a marketing assistant. And the people had a factory outlet center, but they also had a chain of antique malls. And they said, well, we want someone who knows stuff about advertising, but we want someone who's young who we can train, but you've got to be into antiques. What do you know about antiques? And I said, well, I drove that car out there to this interview, and they looked out and saw I had a 1960 Studebaker Lark, and they looked at it and they looked at me and they said, "You're hired." So that was the beginning of the antique business. And from there, I went from the marketing assistant to eventually the general manager, ended up running this chain of antique malls, and just had to learn really quickly as much as I could, at least a little bit about a whole lot of different things so that I could do my job. And I just fell in love with it. Everything was interesting. It didn't take me more than about a month to realize that, honestly, I could care less about the new stuff at the factory outlet stores. It was the old stuff I thought was cool. And I just got in my blood. I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, amazing. That is amazing. I remember my story this is a crazy story, and I've told it quite often. But whenever I was about 7 years old, I lived behind a large, it was a trailer park. We had a house, and there was a trailer park behind us, and as people would move in and out, they would throw all kinds of it was fascinating to a 7-year-old. They were fascinating items, and I would drag some interesting stuff down the hill. Well, we had a garage, and as I started filling that garage up, my father was like, "You've got to get rid of this stuff, John. You can't keep it." And as a young 7, 8-year-old boy, I remembered Grandma having yard sales, and I said, "Dad, why don't we have a yard sale and I'll sell my stuff?" And my dad said, "I don't think you're going to get much out of this stuff." And he was just told, he didn't want me to be disappointed, but we had a yard sale because I was just tenacious about, let's just have a yard sale. Let's just have a yard sale. And he put his stuff out there and I put my stuff out there, and he helped me price it. And my mom helped me price it. And at the end of the yard sale, I had made a ton of money. And my dad goes, and he always tells the joke. He goes, all of his junk sold and none of my good stuff went anywhere. And so he says, and I feel to be good in this. I think that emotion is really good. Would you agree? Like, being an emotional person kind of helps you feel, it makes you connect to items.
It does for me. I mean, to me, collecting is really about the passion. I started back before, nowadays maybe it's a little more about decorate my house. But when I started collecting, gosh, in the 90s, was about, I learned about this thing. I got one. I love it. Now I want one of every one that was ever made. And the people would go around and they'd have the books and they knew their stuff and they'd tell you all about it. And you could just feel their passion. And the first day I worked, somebody asked me if we had any blue Caprice in the mall. And I said, I think there's one in the parking lot. And they laughed. And then they showed me that, no, it's depression glass. And they took me over and they showed me a piece. And they were so enthusiastic about it. And by the end of the day, I was into blue Caprice. And that's pretty much how I started to learn about everything, is some dealer or some collector would be really into their thing and they would want to tell you all about it. It was the easiest way to learn, way more interesting than reading it from a book. So yeah, I think it's all about passion and connection and nostalgia. And if you're into it and you're enthusiastic, then that shows and people get excited about things. And I like that because, I'm kind of a reuse and recycle guy. I'm not really into new stuff all that much. I mean, there's functional stuff that you have to have, and there's all this tech stuff we have to have now. But really, I just as soon use a refrigerator jar from the 40s as something you bought at the dollar store.
Yeah, I feel you, my man. I agree with that. Like, there's something that I don't know, man. I'm an old soul. Like, I have all kinds of, I mean, my antique store, like, I love sitting here and looking around at the things, and pretty much the stuff that I bring into the store, it's stuff that I fall in love with. I need to send you a picture of it through Instagram, but I picked up this, it's more modern of a piece, but it's fashioned after something older. And it's actually got what I believe is like devils carved into the legs of it. Ooh. And it's a footstool, and it's gilded, it's gold. Now the top of it was a little dirty, but I picked it up for $5 at a wow. It was in my video that I'd put out when I went to it had May the 4th be with you. It wasn't a very good thumbnail. I'm a Star Wars nerd, so it was kind of Star Wars related, so people didn't watch it that much, but there was some interesting stuff that I found in that video, and that was one of those things. And it just spoke to me. But you've seen it. I mean, I seen it. And I was like, ooh, that's going with me. I'm taking that thing home. I'm going to clean it up and I'm going to give it a new name and I'm going to put it in my shop. And that's the way I feel, is that my point is that being an emotional person and being able to have emotional attachments to inanimate objects, for some reason, I have that ability. And I know that if I love it, I know that somebody else is going to love it. For the most part.
Yeah, if you believe in what you're selling, your enthusiasm will project and people will get it and they'll say, oh, that's really cool. And I've seen exactly the opposite. I know some people really don't like Majolica very much. And I watched a dealer, someone picked up a really great piece and said, oh, this is nice. I like Majolica. And the dealer said, I'm sick of that stuff. And the person put it down and walked away. And I thought, well, yeah, because you just killed the buzz. It's really about loving what you do and whatever you do. And in my case, this is what I do.
You have to be a cheerleader for your merchandise. I wanted to take a quick moment and say hello to Mike Global Voodoo. I appreciate you for stopping in. I know that he's a big YouTuber. He's got about 45,000 subs, I think. He's a good guy. He's a late night YouTuber. I love going over and watching Mike just lay the truth down, all nice and thick. So thanks for stopping by, Mike. I really appreciate that. How long have you been reselling? You had said that you had been doing it since you started collecting when you were a young child, but you started reselling. You started working in the antique mall. Is that's what spurred you into becoming a reseller?
Eventually it did, yes. But when I started, I mean, I'm OG now, I guess, because this was before eBay. And because I was running the company, it would have been for me a complete conflict of interest for me to be trying to buy alongside of the dealers that we rented space to. So I could not be a reseller for probably the first decade I was in the business. Then eBay came along, and all of a sudden anybody could be a reseller. But I really started, I got to know things, and I'd be in a thrift store, or I'd be in another mall or a show, or, checking out the competition or looking for new dealers to rent spaces from us. And I'd see things and I know they were a good deal, and I couldn't be a dealer, but I could be a picker. So I would buy stuff, and a friend of mine's mom had a shop, and I'd just take everything and sell it to her. And then she'd, price it up and sell it and make money. We had a nice little thing going. Well, then eBay came along, the business really changed, and I had some personal reasons to want to move on and do other things. I honestly, as much as I loved the people I worked with, I really got tired of management, and they were very good. And I realized that, after we sold the outlet center, they could do what I did. Right. And so I thought, great, this is my chance. So I went to appraisal school, and I became a reseller at the end of 1999.
Nice. So you've been doing it for a day or two. You're more a OV, original vintage. So you've been doing over 20 years. So how long have you been making creative content? Like, how long have you been making YouTube videos?
Well, again, there's the OV, and then there's the new. So because I started out doing, one of the things we used to do in the old days is we'd do this Antique quarterly newspaper, and we'd send it to like 30,000 people on our mailing list 4 times a year. And we would take a picture of things for sale in the mall and do a description. And that's how I had to learn a whole lot about a lot of little things. So about a year ago, I decided that as much as I loved the real world selling, that I wanted to get into social media and really find some new customers, some younger customers. And I thought that'd be a good place to do it. So I started doing daily posts on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook every day. And it was just like doing the old Antique Quarterly. I'd take a picture of something and I'd make a description, and people responded. And that's when Xenomorph, he's a big YouTube watcher, and he's like, you really ought to be going and talking to those people. So I started on October 26th was my first video, and I look nervous as can be. So
you are my man, I can tell you, I can spot a star from a mile away, bro. And you are shining bright. You're going to do great. You're one of the people that were on my list. I was like, maybe he'll come on, maybe he won't, but I was going to ask. And the more I watch your stuff, I'm like, this dude's a freaking rock star. Like when it comes to the antiques, like you just walk up to a case and you're like, this is this, and this is this. And, and I'm like, it's like YouTube is almost beneath what you can do. It's like, you should be like, American Picker style stuff. Maybe we could talk to Mike, and maybe we could get you on an episode. I have a few contacts with him.
That's very flattering. I haven't met them yet. I know a dealer in Iowa who's the next town over, and they said that they're just like what you see on TV and that they're very genuine, but I have not actually met them yet. So I love doing this on YouTube, and if there's greater things in store, that's great too, but I really am enjoying the YouTube. It's a great community. I really was motivated by the idea, I'm watching the real world antiques and the shows and everything I did, and the shows, we're getting tons of people and they're buying a lot of stuff, but there's fewer and fewer dealers because a lot of them are baby boomers and baby boomers' parents. I mean, there's one gal at the Portland Antique Show who's 95. She's been doing it since they started in the 70s. She's still doing it, but those people are going to go away. And I thought, we need to reach out and show how interesting and exciting the real world antique community is, because it's been so collegial and just such great people and so helpful to each other. And I thought, I wonder if that can exist online. And I have been pleasantly surprised to find out that the online community is also really collegial, really open to helping each other. And I thought, well, that's what I can bring to this. And that's what motivated me to start the channel.
I have been instructed by Zeno to remind you that you did Periscope first, and there was a gentleman, or there was another one. He said there was somebody that was from Periscope that's actually in the chat right now, and they're watching you. Is it maybe Paula Lampier?
It is. Hi, Paula. Paula was one of my first viewers. I'm so glad to have you with us still, Paula. It's just great. She's interesting. Her parents worked for Coro Jewelry in Rhode Island in the old days. And one of the first things that was great was I talked a little bit about jewelry, and she shared this whole story about aspects of working in the jewelry business that I had no idea. I had no idea that you didn't work all year long, and you basically, because they only had 3 big seasons and no one wore jewelry in the summer, so they were laid off all year. So, it was, everybody has an interesting story, and that's what I love about this community.
Once again, Zeno said Georgia's first online video content was 8/26/2018. I need a Zeno. If he is willing to be hired out, contact me. I don't know if I can pay as well as George, but I can try. I'm a good friend. But that is amazing. You're such an easy interview. Besides me, I'm going to put you off the hook here. Who is your favorite YouTuber that you're currently watching? Anybody in particular?
Well, I have to say, part of the reason I discovered you is because I have been looking for other YouTubers who have real world locations. And I mean, I really enjoy a whole lot of different things on YouTube. I'm still pretty new to it, and I'm still discovering people that I watch. And I'm going to leave lots of people out who shouldn't be, but I can name a couple of people. You are one of them.
Thank you.
Who I am specifically attracted to your channel because you're also have your feet in the real world antiques as well as the online community. I mean, a lot of people are just buying stuff and selling it and shipping it, and that's great. And I applaud that, and I want that to thrive. But I love seeing channels where people have both. So someone who's viewing right now, Misty from Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter is someone I watch.
I do too. She's amazing. I love her. She's so full of energy, and she's in the chat. So I'm flattered to have her even over here watching.
Oh, it's great.
But yeah, she wanted to say hi to you. So.
Yeah, she's really, and thank you. Thank you to my viewers who came to watch this too. I tried to put the word out because John's got a good channel and he does fun stuff. And well, you're one of my new finds, and I just saw when you opened your store today. I just watched that video, and that was really cool. Then I watched you putting a display together, and those are things I like because I get ideas for things I can do at shows and that sort of thing. I've been watching Crazy Lamp Lady a lot because she was sort of the gateway drug for me as far as all this goes.
Isn't she so wonderful? Like, there's something about her, just the way she's whimsical almost. Like when she talks to the camera, I'm like, I'm over here, but what are you looking at over there? I love her. But anyways, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's great. She's a lot of fun, and they're starting a store. And so watching that process, I've been involved with a few antique stores and malls opening. Yeah. I've opened 2 or 3, and I've helped 1 or 2 close. So I've been on both ends of that business. And so it's interesting to me to see how people are integrating online and the real world together, because that was how I approached my channel. So So those are some, but I've been jonesing during this hiatus because I'm used to being called in to do appraisals, and appraisals, you don't buy people's stuff because it's a conflict of interest, but you get to see their house and what they collect or what their parents collected. And I haven't been getting to do that. And I really enjoy collectors. I like seeing the end user and how they use it in their home. So it's been really fun for me to find people who maybe are starting to resell, but started out as collectors. Patrick at Trusty Huckster Mercantile is someone I've just started watching, and he's got a neat collection. A Vision in Vintage is a very small channel, but she really likes interesting Victorian oddities and a way of putting it together. I did something called the Show Off Your Bunker Challenge a few weeks ago and put together a playlist of other people who also put in videos for that. Yes. And it was really fun because everybody has their own thing. You got to see their house. You got to see how they live with the stuff. And, ultimately buying and selling is great. And I make a living doing it. So thank you all for buying my stuff. But I do it because it's the passion. I'm happy to feed someone's passion, get them something that they see some unique interest, value, function, nostalgia in, and then seeing how it actually goes into their house is really cool.
Right. And that's amazing. Somebody had said DJILLC7 says, I'm not a YouTuber, but George has me hooked on watching YouTube. Hi, George.
Oh, very nice.
Your personality, you are a magnet to metal. People just flock to you, and I can see that. I'm like, man, this dude. I'm glad to get you on now, because 6 months from now, you'll probably be untouchable. You'll be a superstar. But what platforms do you sell on? I know that you do online. So people, if you want to see some of George's finds, you be needing to go over and clicking on his channel, because he does little pop-up sales, and he finds some amazing stuff from he's located there in Western Kentucky, and he finds some pretty cool stuff. And so be sure to click over there. So we know you do the stuff on eBay or YouTube. Do you do anything else? How do you sell your stuff?
Well, the YouTube thing, thank you, Misty, for spurring me. I just did my first live sale as part of a thrifting collab on My Blessed Nests channel, and it was really fun, and people responded well. So definitely going to do more of that. And I sell on eBay. I also, of course, still in the real world. We're not doing those things right now, but generally I do something like, I think 15 shows a year. I'm in 7 different antique mall spaces. And when I say nomad, I really am. And that kind of it's sort of old school now, but before eBay, you really had to travel to find certain things. There's a story I'll tell quickly, but there was this one kind of Blanco glass that that was very scarce, and we were all told how rare it was. And when I went to Grand Junction, Colorado, every single store had a piece. And it was because some furniture store there had bought all of the leftovers when Blanco phased it out, and they'd give you a piece every time you bought a piece of furniture. So back then I bought everything I could, and we sold them, and we made lots of money. Well, then a couple of years later, eBay was on. Everybody in Grand Junction put theirs out for sale, and the prices fell by 2/3. So, it used to be I had to travel a lot. So I've got spaces in Seattle, I've got spaces in Florida, and then here in the Midwest, I'm in Kentucky. So I still get all over the place.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I don't do, I'm probably going to start doing some Etsy. I hear mixed things. I know some people don't like the way it works now, but since I'm new to it, I don't have that bias. So
Right.
I'll probably do that. I have to say, I don't do a lot of clothing, but I see it sometimes because I also conduct estate sales. And I thought about Poshmark, and I went and ordered off of there and had a horrible experience, and the interface was not great. So I have to say I'm not excited about that one. I've never looked at Mercari. I don't know, or Marcari. I don't really know about that. So I'm pretty narrow right now. eBay and YouTube are my main.
I think that what my advice would be to continue doing YouTube, build up your base, and then create an Etsy store, maybe your own personal website. You have a really good, I'm assuming that Zeno is a really good techie. He seems like he knows his stuff. So maybe you could set up like like your own shop and direct people to your own website. I think that you have the personality to really create a brand for yourself. And I want to give a couple shout outs. Sorry. I want to thank Pat Dees. He gave a $5 super chat earlier. Pat, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Alex, the Fat Man Flipper, you just gave $20, and that really is awesome. All of that money goes back into the channel. It goes back into me buying equipment and buying stuff so that I can help make more of these live streams possible. And I appreciate if you give $1 or if you give $1,000, I still I'm still as appreciative no matter what you give. I really appreciate that, Alex. But he's been killing it. Alex is he's got that new money. He's becoming he's been killing it on eBay, shipping all kinds of stuff out. That guy's figured it out more than I have. What is your favorite item to purchase? I know, right? One item.
That's such a tough thing, especially for me, because I'm not a specialist. I will buy anything antique or vintage. I've owned pre-Columbian art, and I've bought stuff. I bought Star Wars collectibles. I mean, I love it all. But
right.
I have to say, I get excited when I find interesting little things that are easy to transport, because I go back and forth a lot, and I really like ephemera. I like things that have a historic connection to a place. Again, it's that nostalgia thing. I I do love Blanco glass, and I always look for things like that, and modernist accessories and home stuff in general. I've grown to really like buying jewelry and boudoir items. I have a good customer base for that, and actually it's turned out it's a really interesting category. I got into it by mistake because a friend of mine was a costume jewelry dealer on the site, and then she got a job in real estate and couldn't do it anymore, and she said, here, sell all my stuff. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. And well, that's how you learn. And it turns out that the glass is interesting. All those things I like about antique glass turn out to apply to jewelry because all those little crystals were made somewhere. And it turns out there's great history. So really anything and everything. But I guess what I really look for are oddities. And I guess the short answer would be anything that I have never owned as a dealer before and I get to own for the first time. I have this sort of bucket list in my head of things. Like I always wanted to own a barber pole, and a guy called me at a barber pole, so I got to buy a barber pole and sell it. So check,
Right.
kind of like that.
That's amazing. Like there's some stuff that I've wanted, like I've talked about it a couple times, but I was at an auction and bought an Amazing Fantasy number 15. I paid $27 for this comic. I held it up and I go, my buddy Brock, you would love, I got to send Brock your way because you will enjoy his Instagram. He's here local. He's a young 20-something-year-old man, and he stands like 7 foot tall, but I call him the junking giant. And he buys all kinds of amazing oddities and stuff like that. He loves turn of the century Victorian. He loves lighting fixtures. He got me into lighting fixtures. And but I was at the auction and I held this comic book up to him. I go, hey, Brock, I'm holding $1 million in my hand. And he laughed and he went like that. And I bought that comic book for $27. Unfortunately, it was missing the top part of the page that said Amazing Fantasy. Oh. But if that would have had that comic book, that would have been the absolute best find of my life. It would have been worth probably about $70,000. But instead, I flipped it for $4,000. And, and that's one of the things, like watching my channel, and you're going to learn if you watch my channel, I'm everywhere. I'm, unfortunately I have to be, because the ability for me I do this full time. I love being a reseller. I love being with my family. I don't need things. I don't desire things. I desire experiences. And this lifestyle gives me those experiences, like interviewing cool guys like you, and just making friends like Mr. Sadie and Aaron and so many people that have changed my life through YouTube. That's worth more than anything. But I have to buy and sell some kind of weird stuff, kind of not really interesting stuff. When I do my videos and I'm in the basement pulling stuff, some of that isn't interesting, but it's all really profitable. But the antique store gave me an opportunity to go out and be able to pick the stuff that I kind of like. I can find the items. I was hearing that you were talking about Crocs selling really well in your area. Man, this winter, you just got to come over to one of my auctions. We have one of the best auction houses in probably 200 miles. I mean, we have some primitives. We bring people from Oklahoma. We get people from Arkansas, and they take it all down to Canton, down in Texas and stuff like that. And they come here and buy because it's cheap. This is our secret. Nobody else can hear this right now. George. But that's the stuff that I love. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. But what? Okay, we asked that one. Okay, that's where I was going with the comic book. That was one of my most profitable picks ever. Do you have a profitable pick? What's your most profitable item you found?
Well, I've had a couple of good picks for myself and a couple of interesting things that have I've helped clients with. So I'll talk just about a few of those things. Personally, the two things I've probably made the most profit on, one was a box about this size, and it was wooden, and it had painted details of all these characters that looked like they were from the Middle East. And I was at a show. It was a bad show. Nobody was making any money. It was the last day. It was an hour before it left. There were no customers. And I thought, sometimes you buy your way out of a show. I'll go shopping. So he had all these boxes, and he said, all the boxes are $25 each. And I bought two I liked, and then I saw that one. I said, oh, okay, I'll take that too. Took it to a friend of mine who's an Asian art dealer, and we opened the lid, and he says, oh, it's painted underneath. It's painted on the bottom. It's painted on the inside. This must have been for royalty. Let me put it online. And this $25 box sold for $2,500, and that was pretty great.
That is amazing.
Well, and it turned out to be an amazing item. That the fact that I even found it and was able to hold it in my hands was just a really cool thing.
Right.
I went to a sale once where they had these stacks of pictures, and they had actually, the family, for some reason, before they had the sale, to save money, had shut the electricity off, so you couldn't really see what was in there. And they're like, oh, all the pictures are $20. So I went through and picked out 8 or 10 that looked pretty good. And I thought some of them are going to be bad, but when I get them in the light, but there's got to be something good in there. Well, there was one that was an Edward Curtis, and it was this blue color, and it was a photo print of Aphrodite in the clouds, and basically they sandwiched the negative so this woman looks like she's floating in the clouds. It was pretty amazing for 1920 or whenever he did it. And that was another $20 fine that went for, I think, $200 or $2,500. So it happens once in a while. I mean, some people get amazing things. A friend of mine in Spokane had a piece of furniture come in that she bought at an auction, and she was about to sell it for $400, and someone says, that's old Chinese, and she sent it off, and it went for $400,000. So sometimes you get that lifetime find. I haven't had that yet, but I'm hoping.
I want to give Missy a shout out. She gave us $10 super chat. Thank you so much. You're a sweetheart. I really do love you. I know we don't know each other, but I love your energy. I love your show. I love how you do your sales. I love your channel. If you guys are into George, if you like George, you will like Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter. I posted her link in the chat. So go over, and if you're interested in the antiques, if you follow me for the antique aspect of what I do on YouTube, then you're going to love her, because she's finds some amazing stuff. And she also has little pop-up sales, and she just puts the item up, puts a price on it. And that's what I like, because they're not overcharging for this stuff. It's really good deals. They post these items, and if you say first, you get it, and you're not overpaying. You're not having to worry about auctioning stuff and like, oh, you get caught up and then you spent a little too much. Their stuff's really reasonable. I've got a couple of items that are on their way right now to me from George, and I can't wait to get them. Thank you, Misty. You're awesome. For me, I went to in Greenville, Missouri. There's some little nice little storage sheds that people sell out of. And I went there, and I was looking around, and I love cameras. I've got a display of cameras over there, and I love old cameras. I love doing photography. And I was looking through some cameras, and I found one, and the name rang a bell with me. I'm like, I've heard that name before, and it was Hasselblad. And I go, that's a nice camera. And I go, I think I'm going to buy that. I think I'm going to pick it up. It was $300. I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, I am going to buy that. It was a Hasselblad 503 CW, and it actually belonged to a person that did paparazzi in Los Angeles. And the guy came back, and he brought his motorcycle and his all of his stuff with him. And in this storage shed, I bought a set of like gas tanks for an old knucklehead. Ooh. And I paid $200 for those, and they were in really good shape. And then I got that Hasselblad, and then the Hasselblad had 5 Zeiss lenses in the case with it. So it ended up being about $3,000 or $4,000 worth of stuff that I picked up for $300. But unfortunately, I had no idea really what I had, and I was in the other room. And my wife's a photographer. If anyone follows her on Instagram, you can see she's just got the eye for photography. And I hear her scream, and my wife's not an emotional person. She's like, it's a Hasselblad. It's a Hasselblad. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't really know. Like, I know it's a good camera. It's like, it's worth like $300 or $400 alone. And she goes, no. And she started showing me comps for this. And I'm like, well, And she goes, "It's mine." I go,
Ah.
"Yes, dear, you can have it. Happy wife, happy life." It's the way I've been married for 21 years. And I hope she don't leave me, because I told her, if you leave me and you pack a bag, pack two, because I'm going with you.
That's great. Well, the fact that she helps you and likes what you do and is part of it is really great. You know, it's nice to have family around. Everybody needs more help in this business. It's a lot of work, actually. I think people, especially if you have a real world store or do shows or things, you know, it's another. But I've got to say, being in the online selling more now, that's also a lot of work. And you know, it's a slow process to sell volume. I'm used to selling a lot of volume, so it's a different game.
Yeah, Harry Humstone wants to know what's Nevermore. I am a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. Like, if you look here, like right by, like, I've got this bird cage, and then on top of it, I'm a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. In fact, when I was in college, that's what I did my final paper on in English, in my English Comp 2 class. So that's where Nevermore Antiques. My thing is, you got to buy it, because you might not never see it again. Nevermore. And there's so many items that I wanted to buy, and I didn't buy them, and I went back and they were gone. They were Nevermore.
I thought that was a really clever name, because it reinforces, oh, scarcity, and yeah, maybe never again. And it's true. Yeah. We all in this business all have the one that got away. We all have the story about, oh, I should have bought that thing. And that kind of gets back to the camera. For you folks who are newer to reselling, who might be watching this, don't be afraid to step up and pay real money. If you see a comp that looks good and it looks like there's bids and there's activity, you know, it's true that you can buy a $3 item and sell it for 10, and that's a great markup. But if you buy a $300 item and sell it for 500, you made a whole lot more money. So you kind of have to weigh that out.
Yeah, that is true. Now here's a question. We are running. Let's see what I'm not sure how long we've been in here. The timer, I can't see it. I'm not sure. I will check. Looks like 38 minutes. So I don't want to keep you forever.
I'm good as long as you're good, but I know you've got obligations.
I have no obligations, man. My slate is clear. Do you have a strange or crazy reselling story? Like, have you?
No, before I laugh, go ahead. I want to hear the rest of your question.
No, that's it. Do you have a strange or crazy reselling story? I've had a few. I've brought some stuff into my house that I don't think should have been it should have been brought into my home. Other than that, like, I've dealt with some really sketchy people. I mean, I've had some crazy stories, but I bought some stuff one time at an auction that was stolen, and it was all vintage 1950s Boy Scouts, and I had no idea. And I started listing this stuff on eBay, and it was from a defunct Cahokia, over in Cahokia Mound. So it was all really cool, really neat Indian, Native American based 50s Boy Scout stuff. I had the horse blankets for parades and sold it. And I felt bad for the guy, and I ended up giving the stuff all back to him. And that was one of my crazy stories. But do you have any that you would be willing to share?
That's a good one, and that does happen. I learned a long time ago, if they seem sketchy, tell them they have to come back for an appointment, and they won't, because they want money now. So that's a good way to get around that. And I learned the hard way too. I bought a necklace that was hot as could be, and I bought it over the counter, and 20 minutes later in came the police with the picture of it saying, "We're looking for this necklace." I was like, "Oh, great, here you go." They just left. So that was short. But I've had I've had a lot of crazy stories. I mean, I conduct estate sales, I do appraisals, I do antique shows, and I've got mall spaces and have run malls, and I've had weird stuff happen in all of them. I'll try to let's see, estate sales. We were at one estate sale, and a friend of mine was helping. She's a very girly girl, and thank goodness we had to leave right before she opened the next box, because when I went back the next day, I opened it up and there were two human skulls staring at me. And I don't.
Oh, wow! So they were real.
They were real, and
nice.
I think I would have had another estate sale because the gal helping me would have fallen over dead if she had opened the box.
Right.
So that was pretty crazy. Found out they were legal to sell at that time, and we did in fact sell them, although not at the estate sale because I didn't think having that smiling face at the door was necessarily the best idea.
Have candles coming out of it.
Exactly.
Alas, poor Uric, I do him well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we could have you do co-readings too. It'd be great. The we had let's see. Storms seem to be a thing at shows. I do this show up in the mountains that would have been happening Memorial Day weekend, but of course not this year. But it's Packwood, Washington. It's this giant flea market. It's never advertised. It's fantastic. It's like a mile. There's thousands of people selling and tens of thousands coming and shopping. And the weather is quirky because it's at the base of the mountains, and we're outside under tents. And I told my neighbors it's going to pour rain at 2:30. Oh, the sun's shining. It's great. It's great. It's great. And about 2:15, I start packing up and closing the tent. You're crazy. It's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. The sun's shining. I'm like, trust me. They said it's going to pour. And 15 minutes later, when it started to pour, I watched my neighbor's booth fill with 2.5 feet of water. Their stuff started floating, and everybody ran into my tent, and we just watched the whole thing turn into this river.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just crazy. So that was pretty awful. I had the same thing happen at Mount Dora last year. We had a derecho blow through, and
gosh, yeah, that's horrible.
You could hear shelves falling and stuff smashing. And again, I really pay attention to the weather when I'm doing outdoor shows. I don't like doing outdoor shows much, but there's a couple that are so good that you have to. So those have been fun things. We had a really great experience in terms of crazy at a mall once that I was part of. And that was that a woman came in and I liked Blanco glass and had a bunch, and she came in and started picking out pieces, and then she started picking out more, and pretty soon half of my wall was empty and the other dealers were emptying out, and she ended up with 120 pieces at the counter, and we're like, is this real? What's going on? Turned out she was the buyer for Nordstrom's. We sold Nordstrom's probably 1,000 pieces of Blanco in the space of a year because they were redecorating their juniors departments with it because the colors matched the fashions in the late 90s.
Wow.
It was just great. It was the gravy train. We had so much fun with them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm sure it's all sitting in their warehouse somewhere. At some point, it'll come back out on the market. So.
Yeah, it'd be nice to contact them. Be like, "What did you do with all that glass you bought?"
Yeah. I come to think of it, and we've had celebrity. I worked at Antiques at Pike Place, which was a mall at the Pike Place Market in Seattle, and that was such a big tourist destination. We had, Robert Plant came, the members of the band Sonic Youth came in. It was funny.
Wow.
Everybody started following them around like they were shoplifters, and I'm like, no, they're famous, they're rich, it'll be fine.
They're not stealing. They got money. They'll be okay.
Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City came in once.
Wow, that's cool.
Tori Spelling bought a piece of mine to give to a friend of hers. I mean, it was just, it's kind of neat. Sometimes you just run into people who are interesting for other reasons, and in every case, again, because we're in collector mode, they all were really interesting, real people in person because we were focused on what we did and what we liked. And about, you're a celebrity. It was like, wow, look at this cool stuff. So that was really neat to see.
I've had an opportunity to talk to musicians, and I find that that they just want to be treated like normal people. My nephew's real good at that. He has a buddy that has a YouTube channel. It's Scott Bowling is his name. I think that's the name of the YouTube channel. And he brings people in. He's more into the harder genre of music. I'm more of a Backstreet Boy, and my nephew likes Korn and stuff like that. And not like the food, but like the band. That's he had explained it to me. And I was like, and he's getting all these pictures, and one of the drummer from Korn, like, here's my phone number, and if you're ever in Nashville, stop by my house, because my nephew is just really good at just being buddies. He's like a good buddy, and I think that a lot of famous people, they miss that. They just want friends. I mean, we all want friends. We want people that just like us for us, and And he's real good at that. And I find it to be interesting. And you probably are pretty good at that too.
I've had a few celebrity experiences, and that's been my experience every time. If you treat them like a regular person, they respond that way because they really are. And I think they get enough of being put on a pedestal and fawned over after a while. They really like it when someone treats them normally. So that's kind of cool. I notice on the screen here that, yes, I did unwittingly turn my van into an ant farm by kind of a combination of too many days on the road. Probably, I think it was maybe the peanuts I spilled. And then I bought something, I bought this really great tiki god. It's in one of my my bunker challenge video, actually, because it's on my porch. I bought this palm trunk that had been carved with the tiki face, and there were two of them. And I bought the one and set it in the car, and then I bought the other one and set it in the car and didn't realize the other one was completely infested with ants. There was a colony of ants inside of it.
That's horrible. Were they just black ants, like little, what we call them, piss ants? Or they weren't like fire ants or anything, were they?
No.
Okay,
fire,
good.
But I've definitely, and you find weird things in things too. I know Crazy Lamp Lady has an urn that she showed in her bunker challenge that I was watching yesterday or today. I think she just posted it, and she said, "Oh yes, that's George over there. We named him because I bought the urn and it felt really heavy, and when I got it home, well, there was somebody in it." So, and I've had that experience too.
I've probably would have to say one of the weirdest items that I bought was a urn full of ashes at an auction. And once again, it's my emotional attachment towards stuff. I gave the darn thing a name, and I had it in my previous antique store, and I called him Fred. And I said it was a guy, Fred. I made up a whole backstory that he was probably 70 and a grumpy old man, and he was sealed in this urn. And people's like, well, why don't you spread his ashes? I go, I would love to, but the urn has been sealed and you can't unseal them. And so he traveled around with me. He lived in my house, freaked my wife out. He was up on the refrigerator. When you, not to get morbid, but when they cremate you, you're kind of coarse. And I would pick him up, and somebody would walk into the store, and he'd be sitting on the shelf. He was just out there, not for sale. And they picked it up, and they go, "What is this? It's beautiful." And I go, "It's an urn." And they pick it up, and inevitably they'd go, and they'd go, "There's something in here." I said, "Yes, that's Fred." And he's a good guy. I bought him at an auction for $2, and he needs love. So I just, kept him in my antique store. Then he went home, went to the refrigerator, freaked the wife out. So then I took him down to the shop and put him up in the shop, and he stayed there for a while. And I have a buddy, his name's Tim Smith. If you ever need any cool artwork done, any flyers for anything, he's a really cool guy. He's the one that did all my logos, my windows and stuff. Off the point, but I ended up giving him to Tim because Tim is a purveyor of carnival oddities, sideshow oddities, and macabre type items. And I said, Fred wants to come live with you. I said, would it be okay if Fred comes live with you? And Tim says, I would be elated to have Fred live with me. And so he's been with Tim ever since. It's been about 5 years now. And I don't know, like I was going to bury him, and my wife wouldn't let me bury him down by the dogs. And I said, well, he might not want it to be buried. So I don't want to, I was as respectful to him as could be. I was like, I would love to be, if I was in an urn, I'd love to be put in an antique shop somewhere. I would just love it. I don't know. I was anthropomorphizing the urn and putting my own desires onto it. But I don't know. I'm a weirdo, so you'll have to forgive me.
Oh, no, I love it. When I was a kid, my grandmother she was a genealogist, which is probably where the history gene comes from. And she commissioned my mother because we lived out west, and most of our family had never gone out there on that side. And she had traced one distant cousin to Seattle, and she disappears around 1923. So could you please find something out? Well, my mom found the death certificate, and my grandmother said, well, go to the funeral home and find out if they have more information. Well, we go to the funeral home, and my mom tells the story, and they said, just one moment, we'll be right back. And they come out with an urn and said, here's your cousin Elizabeth. You have to take her. We legally have to give her to the closest living relative. And that.
Wow.
So we walked home with this ancestress, and my mom was so freaked out. It was great. We were going to a soccer game, so we had to actually like rent a locker back when you could do that and put her in it and then get her out at the end. And we sent her to my grandmother, and my grandmother was so pleased. And when she died, her will stated Elizabeth will be buried with me. And anyway, so they're in Kansas City.
That's awesome. Well, good for them. My cousin, we took him out to the cemetery, and we buried him. I dug the hole and buried him on top of my grandma, and they were right over. I mean, that boy was her heart. I mean, I was real close to my grandma too, but that dude, that was her pick. And it's fun when you can just, I mean, death is something that comes for us all, and it doesn't bother me at all. That kind of rhymed, but I didn't mean that. I wasn't like the morbid Dr. Seuss there. But if you had to pick one item category to resell, what would it be? You're somebody comes to you and says you can only sell one item, one category for the rest of your life. What are you gonna? What is George gonna be reselling?
Oh, yeah, that's such a hard question. I watched your last live and you asked the guy, and I thought that's a really hard question. And I mulled over it the last week. And
you had a week.
One?
You had a week. You knew it was coming. I sent you the list.
One? I can't believe it. Okay,
so just one.
I guess it would probably be advertising because it crosses so many different things that I'd still get my thrill of getting to buy different kinds of stuff. And I really
very political answer. Good for you. That's a good way to. That's the way to get your fingers in as many different categories. That's not what I was looking for, but I'm giving you points for it for style.
Well. And I'll tell you, for me personally, lately, it's funny. I'm back to the coins. It's back to 6-year-old. I've been buying coins and expanding my collection. So personally, that's currently what I'm into.
Okay, we've up to the final question, and we're at 51 minutes. What does your future hold on YouTube and reselling? What are you looking down the corridor and looking forward to?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your vision for me because that sounds great. So I think I'll go with that. No, I mean, honestly, when I started doing this 6 months ago, it was because I love this stuff. I want to bring the real world and the online world of antiquing together. And I wanted to meet other people who were into this stuff and like-minded. And that was it. I didn't have any idea of, oh, I'll get monetized or I'll get a bunch of subscribers. Or I thought, if it's 5 people or 500,000, I've spent a long time doing this and I have accrued a lot of information and knowledge. And I thought, I don't wish to leave this realm and have that go with me because a lot of other people were really generous with me with that. And I wanted to give that to everybody else. And so that's my number one goal still. But now that it's actually turning out that people like it and it's a thing, I definitely want to do, I'd like to do more live sales. I'd like to, I'm actually hoping to introduce some membership levels where people who, I want to keep always doing what I'm doing for my subscribers now, but I'd like to do some extra things for people who are really into particular things or particular, if they want live stream or that sort of thing. I'd like to do some things tailored to people who really like that. So that's a goal for me on YouTube. And honestly, my other goal is to become a little more tech savvy so that Zeno doesn't have to coach me from thousands of miles away and tell me, no, push the on button,
Right. That's funny. Well, if you ever have any questions and he's not available, just let me know. I'm pretty tech savvy with this stuff too. I'm looking to, I'm in the process of putting together a new computer for my streaming here. That way, my lives are a little bit more interactive with some of the people in the chats and stuff like that. I would like to go forward with this. I really love this interview because it gives me an opportunity to just get some intimate personal knowledge of people and develop relationships. And I definitely look forward to that. That's what I want my future to hold. Is there anything that you have coming up that you would like to let the audience know about? What would you, Any sales coming up? Do you have anything like that?
It's a little hard to tell right now. Things are kind of nebulous because so much of what I do is in the real world stuff. But I'm hoping, and I don't want to promise, but I'm hoping to put together a Mother's Day sale in a few days here. Maybe do jewelry and boudoir and some stuff for the ladies. And so if I can get that together, that would be my next YouTube thing. I'm going to continue to release a new video every Wednesday. That's my night I picked out. And hopefully some extra content as well. And then in terms of, in terms of other stuff, I am the next appraisal. I do appraisal fairs too, and the next appraisal fair I'm scheduled to do is on June 13th in New Harmony, Indiana, with Cindy Smotherman of Firehouse Antiques, and they have an annual show there, and it looks like a lot of fun. And I'm hopeful that that's going to still happen. We'll see. Indiana hasn't really, and I think they also haven't figured out exactly how they're going to handle it in light of the new limitations on crowds and people together and stuff. So it's going to depend on that. I sent my application for the huge July Portland Antique Expo off today, just in time for them to decide that they're not going to allow any big gatherings until at least September, which I get it. It makes sense. So probably end up doing the October show there instead. Usually this is show season for me, so I'm a little bit rudderless right now. So mainly I'm going to keep working on YouTube. I'm going to keep working on my storage house. I do have some consigners who want me to bring things there, and I'm going to put an estate sale together there. So hopefully I'll have an estate sale in Kentucky sometime in the next few weeks. And, from there, we're just still trying to figure out how do we do the business now that we have to do it differently than we did before. And when we get some more answers from on high about what will be allowed, then we'll tailor our stuff to it. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Kristen said, yes, more live sales and hangouts. Love hearing more about everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, Kristen. I really appreciate that. And then we have Kevin Stanforth, who said, what is the best piece of treasure craft to look for?
Well, hey, Kevin, thank you for asking. I wrote the book on treasure craft in 2004, I believe, and it all stemmed from me buying a set of the Hawaiian Drummer Boy and Hula Girls at a thrift store in Vancouver, Canada for $30. And I thought, these are cool. And I started buying their trays. And this was in the early 90s, and orange could not have been more out of style. And everybody was like, what do you want with that stuff? Well, I think it's really cool. And what I have found over the years is that what's interesting to me about that company is their stuff morphed so much. They weren't like a lot of companies where they're like, we do this and we're going to do it until we go out of business. Every time things changed, they would just drop everything they were doing and do something completely else. So if you like the early stuff, the early pixies, if you can find them in the sprites, they call them, in the little boxes, are good, and they're going up in value if they have the box and the little slip with them. It's hard to find that all together. If you're into the Hawaiian, look for black glazed tiki. That is very hard to find. They did some of them as experiments and they never put it in the line, so that's really difficult to find. If you see those, they're worth a bunch of money. Wow. I'm looking for one to replace the one I broke at home. Yeah, it happens. But then right at the end, they went out, they quit producing in this country in 1995. And one of the last lines they made was they did all these cookie jars that were very limited edition. Like they did one that's Roy Rogers and Trigger, and they had Roy Rogers come in and sign it. It was right before he died. And they made about 200 or 300 of them. Wow. Very valuable. So, it just kind of depends on what aspect of their production you like. But there's definitely... those to me are specific things to look for that they did that are definitely of limited supply.
No, I don't know what this means, but 1969, Nathaniel said, how long do you think it will take for brown furniture to come back in style?
Very good question. Now, brown furniture is a euphemism. I think that came from England originally, and they're talking about little brown pieces of furniture that were made, 80, 100, 120 years ago. But in a bigger sense, really, because modernism is so popular right now, things that are dark stained oak and walnut are really selling for much lower prices than they used to. And for a long time, I thought, wow, the modernism is in and this stuff is out. It's too traditional. Nobody's going to want this anymore. Well, a friend of mine opened an English furniture import store in Washington State in a little town. And I went in to visit him and I said, well, how's it going? I didn't think people wanted this stuff anymore. And he said, it's going great. I sell to 30 and 35-year-olds all the time because they like modernism, but it's all gone through the roof and they can't afford it. And they're buying this instead because it's small, it's easy to move, it looks cute, it's old-fashioned, it feels like quality. And so I actually think brown furniture, and I've noticed that too, if I keep the prices down, brown furniture is selling again, and not just to people who want to paint it white.
Yeah, that's really interesting because there was that whole people were just buying it, and a lot of it got painted, and that makes it. I guess it'll make it more rare. If anyone has any questions, we want to start wrapping this up. But if you have any questions, you have the man that can answer them. I mean, you can see he doesn't even miss a beat. So ask your questions real quick. Teofane says, curious to know what George thinks will be the next big trend in collecting.
I always look at it as eras, and I remember writing an article for the Antique paper back in sometime early 90s about how it's a new decade and all of your antiques just got to be a decade older. And what that means to me is that stuff that now is going to be vintage, and I'm sorry, I know Etsy says 20 years for vintage. In my mind, it's always been 30 because you need a generation to have lived through it and pass it on to the next generation. But anyway, 30 years ago, well, we're talking about 1990. So I am now looking for 1980s things that have that big deco revival feel to them. I'm also looking for 1990s things. And of course, we always think of toys and collectibles because that's what comes back first. People want their childhood back or all the things mom threw away, but then everything else follows. So I really think that looking for pieces made in the 80s and 90s, and I honestly think that production pieces, I've noticed a lot of people like Hager pottery now. They made a lot of really cool stuff in the 80s and 90s, and it was big and it was showy and it was production. It wasn't limited edition things.
Yeah.
And so I look for those sorts of things. I actually, because I'm in Seattle a lot, I'm seeing a lot of the first generation of Chihuly glass, and the people he taught is starting to show up in estates, and it's not selling for anything near what it sold for new. And I think this is a great time to pick that up because he's still a big name and he's well known and he's getting up there. He's not going to be around forever, so there's lots of things, but I would say look for things that are just now, the things that people have forgotten and are just starting to remember again.
That's interesting. Thrifting Goomba Mike says, do you ever find something that you thought wasn't worth much, but it turned out to be worth a lot? Anything any surprises? Yeah, I get a lot of surprises. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And that's why I say, take a chance. If you see something and you haven't seen it before and you can't find a listing, don't leave it behind because you can't find a listing. That may mean that it's really hard to find.
Yeah.
I definitely think I found, I found a little medallion. I like buying little tokens and medallions, and I found one and it had a little inscription on it. It was really hard to read. It was a couple dollars at an estate sale. And when I got home and looked at it under a magnifying glass, it turned out to be a presentation piece from the 1926 Philadelphia sesquicentennial, there's a word, exposition.
And you didn't even miss a beat.
I had to practice that one a lot. That means 150 years. So it was basically for the 150th anniversary of the founding of the country. And they had essentially like a World's Fair or a regional fair. And this guy was an air ace who won this medal for doing some aerial tricks over the exhibition grounds. So it's a one-of-a-kind thing. And it ended up selling for, I think, $300. And you do find sleepers. Nobody can know everything about everything. I mean, just to make you all feel better or worse, I had a piece of Roseville Futura pottery that didn't seem quite right, and I showed it to a friend of mine who is really knowledgeable about pottery, and he said, "Oh no, that's not right. The glaze is all wrong." I put it in my mall space for $40, and the dealer who knew that, yes, it was Roseville Futura and it was a factory second, which is why the glaze was wrong, bought it and sold it for $400.
Wow.
We all miss things. So, that's why I tell people you can go to an antique show and have a good time, and you can find things to buy. I mean, you think, oh, that's top retail, but not everybody knows everything they've got. Stuff just comes.
Real quick, what do you think of Antiques Roadshow?
I became an appraiser because of Antiques Roadshow. I ended up being a backstage guest when they were in Utah. I was visiting a friend of mine, and she had two really great things that she didn't agree with. Well, she had 60 things she'd inherited from her grandparents. And one was a set of Minton's Queen's Beasts, which are these little figurines. And that one got her on Antiques Roadshow. And I told her to bring it. And she said, but that's only from 1953. That's not old. And I'm like, look, it's great. It's a full set. They're going to love it. And they did. And they didn't know what to do with me because it wasn't my thing. And after I stood at the pottery table kibitzing and saying, oh yeah, that's a this, the guy, the appraiser, who was very kind about it, and I'm sure I was annoying him, said, why don't you go backstage? And I'm meeting the Kino brothers, and I'm seeing all this stuff that's going to be on TV. And I found out that there's a whole level of appraisers on the level that I'm at now. We're not Antique Roadshow level, but we know some stuff.
Right.
Who are doing all the background research for them. And I thought, oh, I could learn to be one of them. So I went to appraisal school. A lot of the Antiques Roadshow people were our teachers, and they were wonderful. So wow. I really can't say enough about Antiques Roadshow. I think people sometimes say, well, they only deal with these really rarefied things. But if you go to one of their events, I went in the old days before you could get tickets, there were 8,000 people standing there. They're only going to pick 20 items. So they're going to pick the cream of the crop because that's the unusual thing, which is great because it gives me a niche where I get to talk about all this cool stuff that regular people like you and I get to see all the time.
Right. Well, there are a couple more questions, but I think I have a good idea for a show for the Antique Nomad. AMA, Ask Me Anything. That would be, now maybe not anything, but anything antique related. People are interested in you, and I knew it was going to happen. And we could sit here and answer questions all night, but I don't want to keep you captive. So do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I just am very grateful to you for having me on. I'm very excited by this online community of collectors and resellers and people who are into this. And it is just so great to find another level of the antique business. So I really want to thank everybody for being so welcoming and supportive of me. And I really look forward to continuing to do this for a long time to come. And it's so great to make the personal connection. And John, I see why everybody says you're a really great guy. It just,
well, I wouldn't go that far. I always say there's two Johns. There's one John that people say he's the best guy you've ever met, and the other John, hey, you might not like so much. Yeah, both are true. But I treat people well, and I hope that it shows that I just love people, and that's my passion. Antiques and people, and they're both fantastic, but people are worth way more than antiques.
This is all fun, and it's a great reason for us to connect together, but the connections really are what matter in life.
Yeah, exactly. Because you know what? I always tell, I have 3 sons, and my son, he's 12, and I always try to instill, this is my final thought. When you're laying on your deathbed, it isn't how many TVs you acquired, how much of this that you had, how much money's in your bank account. It's going to be, what did you do with your time? How did you make a lasting impact on the world? You're going to leave the world. How will it remember you? And I think that you are a great guy, and I think the world's going to remember you well. I think you've got a lot of time left, and you're going to do great things on YouTube. And I know, what a weird thing to say, but it's the truth. You're going to do a lot of great things on YouTube, and I look forward to being your buddy and watching you grow and cheering you on as you climb and get to that level that you deserve to be at. So anyone who has not went over and subscribed to him yet, please do. I'm going to let him say the final word, and we're going to end the broadcast.
Okay. Well, I jumped in there, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, and I can't wait to see your shop.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So you guys have a good evening. If you like this video, be sure to share it out. Let's help the Antique Nomad get a lot of face recognition, build him a great audience, and appreciate you guys. God bless. Keep on digging, keep on picking, and remember, the family that picks together sticks together.
Bye-bye now.